The one nice thing about having a 9-month delay is that we had a soft prep for those 9 months. We were able to anticipate most of the production problems we encountered. Jim was able to storyboard almost the entire movie himself and created certain panels in color that he could pass out to the department heads so they had a perfect idea of the visuals Jim planned to get on screen.
What a director does is always weigh aesthetic versus monetary. You know, you're always making aesthetic choices and then finding out how much it costs and working within the constraints of the budget and the schedule. Well, a producer does the same thing. It's just a shift of emphasis. With the producer, the monetary outweighs the aesthetic. They'll pay homage to it, but what they really care about is the bottom line. The director, it's the opposite. So you have this kind of dialectic of forces, and that's the way movies are supposed to be made.
On a day-to-day basis, I couldn't worry about how the movie was going to turn out. I had to make sure we got the shots we needed, that the compromises that we had to make during production weren't so great that they compromised the picture as a whole, and that I was an advocate not only for Jim but for the movie.
We did the first Terminator for I think, you know, the cost of your motorhome on the second film. Or your oatmeal budget.
Exactly.
Right before we started shooting, Linda Hamilton broke her ankle.
Before the first Terminator, I broke an ankle and tore ligaments, and that never really has been it's never really been strong since then.
And we were concerned and that she'd be able to actually carry out the performance that was essential. She had to run throughout the movie, and it was mostly Linda, by the way, on a broken ankle that had to be wrapped every day, and we had to completely shift the shooting schedule so that most of the running scenes took place later on. And that always throws a production into disarray when you change the schedule as much as we had to.
You know, we shot downtown LA, the worst parts of LA, at night, during the summer, so it was hot, it was humid, it was dirty, smelly, all those alleys and stuff, it was nasty. But it worked for the movie.
The underground nightclub, disco, we called it tech noir because we felt that if we were going to get any good reviews at all, it might be good to spark critics' interest in the kind of filmmaking that we were doing, that it was, as opposed to film noir, tech noir, the dark side of technology. And that's what we called the nightclub in the film. And we shot it downtown in a place that had been a restaurant. And the great thing about it was that it seemed so realistic that people tried to pay to get in the night after we wrapped. We were so desperate for cash at that point we almost took their money, but better sense got a hold of us and we declined the paying patrons.
While we were making the Terminator, summer of 1984, we had this medfly scare in Los Angeles, and so they started spraying Los Angeles. And they would spray, you know, the San Fernando Valley one day, Pomona the next day. And it seemed like our locations somehow ended up matching their spraying areas. Instead of getting sprayed once, we got sprayed like 5 times, you know, because they would move to an area and that's where we'd be shooting that day. They'd move to another area and that's where we'd be shooting that day. So we got sprayed on a lot.
You remember how we did the punch through the window with that steel fist? And we couldn't, and the whole rig was too heavy to move. Right. So instead of moving the car is sitting still, and we moved the brick wall behind the car on.
That's right. Yeah, we moved the brick wall, but I mean.
And you were strapped into this thing with like a fake arm, and your real arm was behind you.
Yeah, the arm was behind, and then the machine arm was right next to me, and so it was shooting from the side. It made it look like it's my arm and all this. It was terrific stuff, but I just remember talking about that alley that we shot those scenes in. I've never done more running than that night. Remember how many times we had to run with the camera really low, running down that alley with this hideous leather boots on, this heavy leather boots on, and then jump up that car and all this. So the stunts were really severe, and it was really tough, especially with all this stuff on it, with the leather jacket and all that, and then the squirts going off and the explosions and all this stuff. But again, I think that the more you as an actor participate in the stunts, the better it's going to work out then, because the more believable it is.
I'll tell you, the most physical thing that I saw happen on that movie was me entering the Earth. which was me coming through time. And they shot that with a stunt guy, and they put 2 ladders up about 5 or 6 feet, and they laid a 2x4 across the top, and he laid on top of it, and they put a camera down low, and he basically just scooched off the ladder and landed. Shoulder, hip, knees. And from 5 feet up, if you think about cement, it does not give. We were behind the camera cars. We hooked up those camera cars, and looking back on it, man, we were driving fast. Those camera cars were pulling us fast, and we were sliding around corners and stuff. And I remember once driving, and I'm screaming at Linda, and we're ripping around corners, and you know, the tension. I mean, I have a hold of the wheel, and I'm screaming, Terminator, you know, whatever, and we're ripping, and he's rolling film, and I'm right in the middle of my speech, and I pull back, and I pulled the steering wheel right off the steering stem, you know, and I'm like, here, you drive, you know. We had a lot of fun doing it.
Arnold was tremendous to work with because you can't get Arnold down. Arnold is always up. And regardless of how difficult a day we were having, Arnold would play a practical joke or say something that would make us all laugh uproariously. And that keeps the morale on the set really high.
He's one of the most professional people I've ever worked with. He has incredible concentration. He takes physical direction like no actor I've ever worked with. He really understands the idea of how to move and how to work with the camera.
He believed completely and unwaveringly in this project.
I get asked about Arnold all the time, of course. Arnold and I rarely, if ever, worked together. Now, I saw him around. He was doing his thing and I was doing my thing. We never worked together. We never did a scene together. That was the only time we were ever on frame together. I mean, we were always running away from him. If he had caught up with us and I was doing a scene with him, we would have had no movie, you know? By the time I got into the same frame as the Terminator, he was no longer Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a special effect, and he was Stan Winston's wizardry.
Jim wanted to see some other variations because he's also an artist who wants, you know, choices. He's a brilliant artist, but he wanted choices. And we went through some variations. Some artistic variations, some sculptures of different possibilities for the look of the endoskeleton, and we ended up going right back to the initial concept that Jim had in the painting. He did some sketches himself, and we started doing detail work, and actually Jim became probably the most important artist in my studio. And it was me constantly being able to go, Jim, I honestly, but why don't you give me a little sketch here? And sort of milk out the sketches from Jim Cameron. Go, okay, fine, we'll work on that. And then I could go over to the guys and say, we're done, we got it. Let's just, here's the body cavity, and here are the hips, and here's the shoulder. And by the time all was said and done, Jim had detailed in sketch every detail of the endoskeleton, and thank God for him. And then I ended up taking credit for it all, which I will continue to do.
When we initially met with Stan, we felt that it might not be possible to get away with as much during principal photography as we ultimately were able to capture on film at that time.
The concept of creating a full-size endo, I literally had to talk Jim into. He planned on most of all of the endoskeleton work being done in stop-motion animation.
Yeah, he was torn about how much should be done which way. He wanted it to look as real as he could, and so he always struggled with how he was going to get what he wanted, given the time and money we had on this project. I think he originally probably thought it was going to be more in stop motion.
I said to Jim, I really think that we can create the endo full size and get a lot of performance out of the real thing, doing it with puppetry and animatronics. And Jim went for it, knowing also that there would be some things we couldn't do that he would have to rely on stop motion animation for.
And with Stan's ability to see the movie from beginning to end and to mind meld with Jim in terms of the storyboards for each sequence, we realized that we could actually do a lot during production, but we had to be able to know in advance what those sequences would entail.